All right, welcome here to the Vanguard Athletics Podcast Network. This is going to be the Coaches Corner. It's an opportunity for us to talk to coaches at Vanguard University and about their experience as a coach here and within the whole community of Vanguard University. Today, we have the privilege of listening in to a conversation with Jeff Melton, who's joined by me right now, and head track and field and cross-country coach Bryan Wilkins, who has been at the helm for 32 years.
Yeah.
As a guy who's been here for longer than both of us
have been alive. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So he's been here at Vanguard, and I know that it was a great conversation. And so Jeff, I want to kind of give a recap on what that looks like as the viewers and listeners jump into this one.
Yeah, exactly. So, like Mike said, Vanguard Athletics is privileged to have Bryan directing both our track and field and cross-country programs. For this interview, we're gonna kind of steer things the cross-country side. Their season had just come to a close when we sat down with Bryan. They had, kind of just gotten back from the national tournament up in Washington, and kind of the success and the way things are building. The numbers are increasing, the times are lowering, all that excitement on the cross-country side. So we're gonna have a really cool conversation with Bryan Wilkins. He is just an incredible man. He's led the both of his programs to multiple NAIA Champions of Character awards. He's a Vanguard Athletics Hall of Famer. And, every year they're just doing great things in the community, and the way he's impacting his players, his runners, his throwers, however we want to detail their positions and stuff.
Athletes.
Those athletes is really cool. And so I'm excited for you guys to hear this conversation. So we're going to jump right into my conversation with Bryan Wilkins of Vanguard Cross Country. All right, welcome in, Bryan Wilkins, head coach of Vanguard Cross Country. You just finished your 32nd season.
Yes.
So Mike and I were actually joking earlier that you've been coaching Vanguard Cross Country longer than both of us have been alive. So that's quite an accomplishment when you kind of view it in that frame, but I'm sure it hasn't felt like more than a decade or 15 years, with time flying fast and just always just seeing a new fresh faces on your team and things like that. So if you can kind of go back in the time machine to when you first started getting approached about the job and kind of how you made your way to being involved within Vanguard Athletics.
Yeah, that was a few years back, but it was Ron Purdyman, who was the athletic director at the time, and I didn't attend Vanguard. I went to Evangel, sister school back in Springfield, Missouri, but I was spending all my summers out here when I was in college, and I had two older cousins who were attending Vanguard, a.k.a. Southern California College.
Yep.
And they were both playing on the baseball team, and it was those guys that kind of got me connected with the school. And so we were living at a house here in Costa Mesa. It was all Vanguard athletes, basketball players, baseball players. So I got connected with the school through these guys, and actually got to know Ron Purdyman through the guys I was living with. And Ron happened to just call me out of the blue one day and said, "Hey, I know you were a runner at Evangel, and we're looking to start a cross country program here at SEC, and I'd love for you to interview for the position." So that was back in 1988. So I came in, interviewed. He offered me a 1-year contract, and here I am, still signing that 1-year contract.
It's the same one. You just never re-signed it, right? Yeah. That's really cool. So then, looking over this time, what has changed the most, both within Vanguard Cross Country and just kind of college athletics as a whole, back from it kind of seems like more back in the 70s at our level, you just came to a school, and if you kind of wanted to run, you did it that way, and now it's a lot more intentional with the recruiting process and things like that.
Yeah, back then there wasn't much of a budget for recruiting and even operationally, and we didn't have a full-fledged track program at the time, and so it was really just cross, and so it was pretty low-key. It's gotten a lot more sophisticated, obviously, through the years, and there's been obviously a lot more money pumped into the program. We have a lot of assistant coaches now for track, that is, but I do have an incredible coach that has been with me 12 years, Kelly Smith, for cross now. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot more moving parts than what we had back in those early years. But some things still feel the same. And just the culture of the running community hasn't changed much. I mean, I love it. I'm passionate about distance running. I was a distance runner. And, if you're born to run distance, you're the type of kid you were back in 1988 is very similar to the same type of distance runner we're recruiting today.
Okay. Obviously we're now in digital timing and in chips and things like that. We've run the Vanguard Invitational, almost 30 years now. So as you go back to when you first did those first couple ones, what's changed in your role of being meet manager for something like that?
Well, in those early years, we were running our meets down at the Back Bay. And I used to take a chalk machine, a little, contraption that had, chalk in it. And I would go down there and it had wheels, so I just wheeled the entire course and marked out a 5K and an 8K course with chalk, and can't do that down there anymore. In fact, we can't even host meets there anymore just because of horses and bicycles through that area. But and then as far as the timing, obviously we had to do all of manual scoring, so we had to have somebody stand at the finish line and kind of hand out a little card with the place number to every athlete that crossed the line. And then the teams would turn those back into us. They'd write the athlete's name on there for each card that had a place number, and I had to manually tally all those up and make a score out of it. So it took a little while.
So it was more on placing finish rather than the actual time of your finish?
Yeah, we kept track of the times as well with a stopwatch, but that was all manual too. And we just recorded them, wrote them down on a sheet of paper. And got that, handed out to the coaches. But it took a little while, whereas now everything's so automated, the timing systems can just print out all the results within seconds.
It was really cool at the meet this year. We were doing split times and stuff like that, and the announcer was doing those things, which I thought was really cool addition to our meet this year. So another thing is, looking back at just the multitude of athletes and, a bunch of All-Americans who've come through on the cross side, what has changed most about Vanguard cross country, the type of athlete we're being able to recruit, and just kind of, I'm sure there's a couple pinpoints along the way where you're like, all right, there's an uptick here with this athlete, brought in, a different environment and kind of kicked everyone into gear a little bit higher, kind of just touch on some of those across the years that you first pop into your head.
Yeah, well, the type of athlete we recruit, that hasn't changed a lot over the years. One of the best athletes I've ever had in my program came the very first year, and that was Sherry Hall. And so that was back in 1988, and she still to this day owns our 10K school record on the track. But we have had some pretty dynamic athletes along the way. There was a gal I decided to try my hand at recruiting internationally, and I recruited a gal out of Kenya back in 2005, and that was Grace Jepnetich. And she ran for us for 2 years before transferring out to a Division I school, but she was runner-up at Cross Nationals her sophomore year, and broke several records for us in cross and on the track. She was a 6-time All-American between cross and track for the 2 years that we had her. And definitely one of the most amazing athletes we've ever had in the program. I would say we had a really good stretch back in the early 2000s where we sent several teams to the national level. Then we had a little bit of a drought. And now the women have sent 2 teams consecutively to nationals just over the last 2 years. So we've won 2 conference titles, which it took us a long time to get to that first conference title. So 2 years ago was the first ever. And we have 2 in a row now, so hoping to keep that string going.
Build on that momentum. So, by the way, congrats again on winning GSAC Coach of the Year on the women's side, guiding them to that second straight title. So, especially on the women's side, it seems like there's just a new sense of life a little bit more on that side of just, their times are just so much better than years past. Do you attribute that to anything specific, or is that just the whole team is kind of pushing everyone further each day?
Yeah, I'd like to say I've gotten a lot better at coaching, but I don't know that it's that. I think part of it is recruiting, very gifted, talented athletes. We had a couple years of really, really good recruits coming in on the women's side. And, my job is just to keep them healthy and hopefully develop them to the next level. But the group that we have currently, they're super passionate about the sport. They are the type of kids that are not satisfied with mediocrity. They want to get better. So they're doing the work over the summer to really lay the base, lay the foundation. And it's shown throughout the course of the season the last 2 years because they're coming in at a high level of fitness, and then it's just fine-tuning that over the course of the season. And we have seen some remarkable performances at conference, over the last 2 years especially. We ran a school record team time on the women's side last year. And the cool thing is it's a really young team. Last year, our top 5 was comprised of all freshmen and sophomore, and then this past year, sophomore and juniors making up the bulk of that top 5. So we're feeling pretty good about the future,
especially moving forward into next year. You guys the women won 3 out of their 7 meets this year, correct?
Correct.
So, and probably the biggest of the victories would have been the one at Cal State Fullerton with all of those Division I teams.
Yes. It wasn't primarily Division I. There were a couple in there, but yeah, we've never come close to winning that meet before, and the fact that we pulled that off this year was a huge accomplishment for us. And then winning our own invitational, the meet was pretty good size this year. I think we had about 19 teams, and so that was a huge highlight. And then winning conference. So yeah, stringing 3 together in a row at the end there, that was exciting for us.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing about that Cal State Fullerton meet is it's actually run in the afternoon, early evening.
Right.
So as opposed to the early mornings of pretty much everything else. So how does that tactically, organizationally, how does that change? Because it's the only one of the whole season that's on a kind of that timing path.
Yeah, correct. Well, we tell our athletes just don't overthink it. Don't spend the whole day obsessing about the race in the late afternoon. Just go about your day as you normally do. Don't worry about it. Get good rest the night before, and the work is done going in to any given race for that matter. So we don't treat it much different. And it's go about your normal day, and then we'll head over to the meet with plenty of time to get our warm up in and be prepared and race. The only difference was probably the weather. It was super hot that day. It was about 90 degrees. So that was a little bit of a challenge for us because we've been practicing at 5:30 in the morning. And so it's always perfect, cool, calm conditions for us. And that was definitely a challenge. It was very hot that day, but our teams obviously handled it really, really well.
Do you think the transition from afternoon practices to more of the early morning, do you think that signified any of the success this year, or are those things not really related?
Yeah, I don't really think that changed much. I was really surprised at how well our team handled the early morning hour. I was a little concerned that we may not get enough rest over the course of the season. It might take a little bit of a toll on us at the end, but it really didn't. I was really impressed with just how highly responsible our athletes were to get their rest, come prepared at 5:30 in the morning, ready to go. I was actually blown away. I expected that it would be challenging and difficult in patches, but for the most part, they handled it really, really well, and the performance obviously showed through that.
So some of our listeners might not kind of understand what a week looks like in season for a cross-country athlete. So kind of break it down a little bit for us of how many miles they're doing a day, how many they're doing a week, when they're trying to peak, those kind of things.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, on average, we're running at least 50 miles a week, and that kind of varies from athlete to athlete, just depending on their ability and their years of experience and their injury history. So we kind of tailor it to the athlete. But on the whole, most of our kids are probably in the 50 to 70 miles per week range. Monday, Wednesdays are our hard days, so we're typically doing some kind of race pace interval workout. On Monday, it might be something like 5 times 1K for the women, 8 times 1K for the men. Wednesday is more of a threshold workout, so that's kind of tempo workout or surges, and it's kind of a pace that's between race pace and easy conditioning pace. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Friday are easy days or recovery days, we call them. Friday being kind of a pre-race day. That's typically like a 45-minute run and some strides on the grass when we get done. Tuesday, Thursday is like an 8-mile run at conversational pace. For the women, that might be like 8-minute pace. The guys might be 7-minute pace. But then they're racing. The guys are racing at pretty close to 5-minute pace. The women are racing at 6-minute pace or under. And then Saturday is a long run, anywhere between 10 to 15 miles if we don't have a meet. And if we have a meet, we do that long run on Sunday. And then there's some double days we throw in as well. So there could be
Just
2 or 3 days a week that they're doing a 30-minute run on their own in the afternoon.
Yeah, so I can't even remember the last time I ran 50 miles in a year, let alone in a week. So that's really fun. So we just got back. Well, you guys got back from the national championships. Weather was definitely a factor. It's Vancouver, Washington at this time of year is much different than Costa Mesa, California this time of year. So, taken up the full women's team by winning the conference qualified. Then we took up Caleb and Josh on the men's side. They qualified with their individual times going up there. So kind of just break down what it's like when you get there and there's 5 times more runners on the course than any of our teams have run in a meet with, and you're practicing alongside all those folks instead of by yourself, and kind of just how different it is once you get there.
Yeah, it is. It's a different atmosphere and can be a little overwhelming. Obviously, the weather is a little bit of a factor. It wasn't near as cold in Vancouver as it was last year when we were in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I think it was about 18 degrees back there. So Vancouver, it was around, I think, high 30s or low 40s. It's definitely, an adjustment for us, though. But probably more so than that is the fact we're racing on an all-grass course, and we're not real familiar with that. We run on a lot
not as much grass around here.
No, we run on a lot of pavement and dirt trails out here. So that's probably the biggest adjustment for our athletes. We're wearing spikes, which we haven't worn all year long. We're in racing flats, but this meet we're busting out the 3/8-inch spikes and running on a course that's all grass, rolling hills, little chillier weather, and then 300 plus runners on the course. And so we prepare the best we can for that, but there obviously we're not able to simulate weather per se. We're not able to simulate the grass a whole lot, although we go over to Tewinkle Park and do a few workouts on the grass over there, and we throw our spikes on at least once and kind of get a feel for that. But it's something you can't fully prepare somebody for, and you just gotta just set them up with the proper training so that they can just go out there and give it their best effort, and hopefully we see good results on the end of that.
Definitely. So exciting time on that end. Before we get out of here, we kind of just want to know what attracted you to the sport of running? How did you first get involved? Why did you choose, the running and the distance over, maybe something was a little more popular back in the day, like baseball, things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I grew up in the great state of Nebraska, so I was a football player.
That's football culture out there, yeah.
When I was a kid, we used to play football out in the yard. We had the biggest yard in the neighborhood, so it was the stadium. But Mom said, hey, you're a little too small for this sport. As I got older, I wanted to play in middle school. And so I picked up basketball, played some basketball in middle school. Loved that. And but I wasn't that good. I didn't have the height that I needed to be an effective basketball player. And so one particular day, somebody told me, hey, you should try track. So I there was a junior high meet where they offered an 800-meter run and a lot of events shorter than that, obviously. But I I kind of thought, well, I'll probably be better at the longer stuff than the shorter. I wasn't super fast as a sprinter. So I tried the 800 and actually did pretty well. And so that was kind of where things were initiated back in 7th grade, running that 800 on the track and realizing, wow, I'm not too bad at this. So it perpetuated from there and built up to the mile in my freshman year, and then to the 2 mile my sophomore year, and started running cross country sophomore year in high school. And just took off from there.
How'd you find your way to Evangel then to compete at the collegiate level?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually was weighing both Vanguard and Evangel at the time because my cousins being out here were trying to convince me to come to Vanguard. But my parents were pushing for Evangel because it was a little closer to home. It's obviously a sister school of Vanguard, affiliated with the Assemblies of God. My dad was an Assemblies of God pastor. And so Mom and Dad were pushing for Evangel. I had an older brother who was already attending there, and it just made sense to go to Evangel. And actually I felt like that's where God was calling me to go as well. So I committed to them and ran cross country there. They didn't have a track program, but got to run cross. But the cool thing was I got to spend all my summers out here in California while I was in college.
So you kind of got the best of both worlds.
I did get the best of both worlds.
You found your way to Vanguard eventually. So we'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's been a privilege talking to you and just learning a lot of history. Some of these things about cross country program I hadn't even known before. So it's really exciting. So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Welcome back here into the studio where you just heard a great conversation between Jeff Melton and longtime head coach Bryan Wilkins of our cross country and track and field programs. Love the conversation, love the heart behind him. Jeff, what are your biggest takeaways after talking with Bryan and just kind of hearing his story?
One of the most interesting things was I learned that his dad was actually an Assemblies of God pastor. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And then I actually hadn't ever heard the story of how he actually got connected out here and became the coach. He actually had a couple cousins that were playing baseball here, and every summer would come out here from Evangel. So he actually picked between Evangel and Vanguard back when he was making his college decision. And in a roundabout way, he ended up choosing both. So it's really exciting.
Right, yeah.
It's really cool. And just the way he shepherded the program and, especially the uptick in the last 2 years on the women's side. And then the men are always competitive too, always sending people to the national tournament or national championships and all that stuff. So it's really cool, really exciting. And, Bryan is one of the coolest dudes in the world. Like we mentioned, he's a Vanguard Hall of Famer. He's won multiple character awards with his teams and his leadership. So, it was really just a special time just to have Bryan in here in the studio. And we hope you guys at home enjoyed it and learned something new about Bryan.
Yeah, definitely. I think Bryan, a Hall of Fame person as well as a Hall of Fame, coach here at Vanguard as well.
Exactly.
Just an incredible guy. So really glad you guys were able to kind of take a listen into that and hear his heart. And one of the many reasons we love having him around. So thank you guys so much again for joining us on the Coach's Corner on this Vanguard Athletics podcast. Feel free to like, subscribe, let people know. Let people know if they're looking for just some kind of uplifting coaches' testimonials. I mean, that's kind of what we're looking to do. We're just looking to share some stories here. So feel free to like, share through whatever podcast medium you listen to, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook
SoundCloud,
video, SoundCloud, all the fun things, right? And so feel free to take a listen, subscribe, like it, and let us know. But thanks you again for joining, and we will see you next time on the Coach's Corner.